Hello everybody and welcome to our bonus stream. And as you have already noticed, we're going to have this meetups from time to time, so hope that you actually don't mind it. And guys, since my YouTube is a little bit wonky today, I would say that I need to fix this in a second. But meanwhile, guys, tell me what is your progress? Did you create something new? And of course, are you going to work on something extra? And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the mapping, about, of course, creating roadmaps, and if possible, we're going to talk a little bit about the volumetrics because we had a little bit of questions about that. And well, we're going to but we hear you, so can you hear me? Hello? You hear me? Is everything okay? I'm just going to wait for the answer. Okay, This was a little bit confusing, but we can hear you, because I'm so used to YouTube lagging that I assume that something is wrong with the sound again. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the composition that we mentioned during our sessions, and of course we're going to talk about the volumetrics for now. Since this is a very interesting topic, I'm going to cover it, let's say, a little bit more in depth, but at the same time we don't really have to go so deep into it because we already covered a lot of it. So remember that exterior webinar where we actually talked about this fog. The fog thing is pretty much everything that we need to know, but of course we're going to try to talk a little bit about it. So for today I prepared a pretty simple scene. You may have noticed that I'm pretty much mimicking the setup from this exterior that was sent to us earlier in our chat. So to pretty much not waste any time, we're going to jump straight into it. But before that, we're going to check your folders. Andrea already told me that she wasn't able to deliver anything new, so we're going to check the Metros folder. Remember guys that this is our final week, so let's say expect you to put in a little bit more work, because this is something that we're hoping to we're pretty much hoping that you will be able to use this to a full extent. And as your final render, I cannot really say anything else than this is amazing. We already talked about this, and there's nothing that needs to be corrected. The only thing that maybe checked, corrected, is this ground, but the color wise and as a 3D visual, this is just looking fresh, so no need for further fiddling. But Dimitra, you can use this time to work on your interiors, finish your first one or start a new one. You pretty much done this second interior in what, 1 day, and why not just try to do it again? Inspiration and your comparison. So starting from the very beginning, we're dealing with 1 point perspective in this reference image, while in your image that we use for our background, this is not a 1 point perspective shot. And another thing is that your background shot is a little bit warmer than the light coming from this bounced area, so that's going to be one of the things that are going to be noticeable. This is a beautiful render, but still needs a little bit more work. What you can do is pretty much scale this lamp a little bit, and you could actually work a little bit more with your scatter, because even though it looks good, it's a little bit too small, so you either need to add more thickness to the objects, or you need to add more of them. You can also control the scale using just a simple gradient to add this effect as you did last time. So you can pretty much add this at your will. You can also try creating multiple scatters, or just an object which is going to control your scale the same way as we would with black and white map. So I'm going to quickly jump into 3ds Max and show you what I mean by controlling the scale by a simple gradient. First of all, let's create some kind of floor plan. By the way, Donald, don't get me wrong, this is looking great, but I wouldn't yet call this finished. You are better than that, and we still need you to work on it. I'm hoping that you won't find this frustrating in any way, because I really think that you are way better than what you delivered at this moment. So I'm going to quickly create some kind of object which is going to be used as my scatter holder. So let's just use this. And of course, for objects like this, you can set the visibility to 0, or you can change the renderability. So object properties and visiting renderable is going to allow you to make this invisible. I haven't uploaded my folder. Eric, you can, I'm going to skip you for now. You can try to upload whatever you've created just for now, and if not, I'm going to take your current renders into Photoshop and we're going to try to experiment with them. That's one of the things I like to do with renders, especially when trying to work for more important clients than the usual. So I like to experiment a lot. The first thing that I'm going to do before creating this scatter system is adding some kind of mapping which is going to be controlled by me. So knowing that UVW map is going to be basically enough, that's what I'm going to add. So this is going to pretty much pretend that it's the plant you added. So this wheat doesn't really need to be any precise object. Let's just try to add something that is going to be enough. So let's go for Corona. We're going to add a Corona scatter, and of course we're going to try to control all of this with our regular scatter and just one map. So now we've got this beautiful scatter, and yeah, it looks awful at this moment. What I mean by awful is that not only all of those objects are intersecting, there's too many of them and there's no randomization. So that's why I'm going to go for scale from 100 and let's go for 30% to 100%. And okay, so this is starting to look a teeny bit better, but it's still not it. That's why I'm going to add a Corona, no, not Corona, just gradient. Let's go for gradient, and for that I'm going to go for black and white colors. Of course, the white color needs to be dominating, in this case in the middle. So let's just go for copy, and now let's create two blackish colors. If you pick gradient ramp, it's going to give you a lot more control, but in this case regular gradient would be enough. So actually, let's start working with this gradient ramp, because as I said, it's going to give us more control, because you can add more points to it, and those are going to be used by your scatters, by pretty much 3ds Max altogether. So I'm going to add this as my scale. So remember to add your map as an instance, and since I did this, you can pretty much see what I've created. At this moment, it's not going to look as good as we planned yet. So what can we do about it? Because we've got quite strong effect around here, and let's just try to render it out, shall we? As always, I'm just going to plug in some random map. So the HDRI I'm using is just for the sake of presentation, so you don't have to add this. It's just so that it's going to be there. And just like that, we controlled this with our gradient. Right now the gradient looks like this. So if I change the gradient's position with just a little bit of moving here and there, you can see how responsive this is. So just try to copy this effect and you can do pretty much the same. So no trickery, no magic here, just a little bit of imagination. So yeah, the noodles are yeah, pretty much like that. So to add a little bit more variety, we're going to add a -5, +5, -5, and +5. So now we have a little bit less spaghetti effect, and avoiding collisions is going to be quite okay, but still we don't need this to be 100% precise. That's why I'm going to go for 50%, and of course the scaling is still a little bit not well, let's say it's not exactly what I meant. So all of the maps, like gradients and pretty much all of those procedural maps, are going to have this option to add a little bit of noise, and I'm going to now show you how it works. It's going to look like a regular noise on top of this gradient, so there's no surprise there, but now you can see that this is going to randomize your scatter to some extent. So let's not go too crazy. Let's add just a little bit of it and try to change the scaling of this noise altogether. So we're going to be able to add more detail, more options, and more everything to your scatter. So it's just going to randomize your gradient further, because we don't need this super strict slope, and at the same time you have a little bit more options in gradient types and of course interpolation. Not really usable in this case, because you can see what happens to this gradient when you change this to solid. It's just one color jumping directly into another one without any gradient. So this is not exactly a gradient if we take away this noise amount. So not really something that is worth using in this case, but of course it's going to allow you for some black and white transitions in some cases. So as always, we're going to go for linear, and it's going to be enough. There's still options to go for fractal, but I see no point in that. And we've got the turbulence. Again, no point. Let's just go for the regular option, and that is enough. The array tool, but it doesn't have randomization. Yeah. Use scatter as much as you can, and I mean it. It's a very powerful tool that will allow you to create a lot of stuff. Chains, chandeliers, well, a lot of stuff. I use this as well, as much as I can, because it is very helpful. So this is how I would approach this, and now this pretty much looks like some I don't know, jungle hut, but still spaghetti noodles is pretty much more accurate. So this is one of the options that you can use to your advantage, and I guess this would actually help you. Definitely add more of those objects. We've got quite delicate object, so you need to work with more volume. Let's just add them in. I really like how you created all those pipes. This is really something that had to take you at least a little bit more time. And looking at this whole image and its, let's say, power, how it reads, I would probably suggest you to play a little bit more with the background. That's why I'm actually going to turn on Photoshop and download your shot. So we're going to talk a little bit more about it in Photoshop. And always, and I mean always, when working with whatever 3D visualization you will have, you may want to go a little bit deeper into it and try out new options. And I just mean it as go for hue saturation and just test what is going to happen when you move this slider left and right. What color is going to stand out? What is your most favorite one? Or maybe what elements need changing? One thing that I already mentioned to you guys is that when you desaturate your image and it passes your initial let's say initial instinct that this doesn't look fake, that means that the problem is in lighting or the colors itself, because right now I would say that this looks very, very realistic when black and white. But at the same time, when we go back into the colors, we can pretty much read that this is not exactly what we would expect. So one of the things that stand out for me, at least, is this window. I would basically either try to add some kind of object that would obstruct some of the view, or try to play a little bit more with the hue saturation of that part, because at this moment it's just too warm for this image. And if we go for something more bluish but not as saturated, and of course we're going to add more of this vibrant color with a little bit of gradient, it would actually look more realistic. So instead of just adding more hue and saturation, I'm going to go for a blur and blur out this mask, so the color is going to jump out through the window a little bit more, and now we have a little bit more realistic color in this area. But still, it's not exactly that. You cannot have sepia behind your windows while you have a fully colored image inside. And that's one of the hints. The second thing I would suggest you is going to filter camera raw. It's always one thing I love to do: clarity. Checking the clarity, which objects are going to respond to it the best and which are not. It's going to allow you to assess which objects are just too dark, which are too light, what materials need changing, and maybe a little bit of mapping. So that's always something I love to do. Dehazing is pretty much going to work with both your saturation, vibrance, and clarity at the same time. So it takes away a little bit of this bloom effect. And lastly, but last but not least, is going for just a plain auto color. It's sometimes it's going to do real magic. Another thing I like to do just to play around is this. Almost the same thing as hue saturation, but in this HSL channels. So now if we try to play around with all of those colors all together, we're not going to probably get the effects we're looking for. So we can just try to check which objects just need a little bit of hint, a little bit of work. Now, when I take away this yellow highlight, you can see that the background is still standing out quite substantially. So that's actually where we actually have this problem. It's just too yellow, too much sepia in it. The greens actually look amazing, but this light doesn't correspond, I mean the plant light doesn't correspond to whatever is happening behind your interior. So that's going to be also important to check that out. Remember to allocate your black planes, because that's always going to be very helpful. And big thanks to all of you guys that you started adding the shots like this, because this is so much more helpful. And of course, just looking at this image, you can quickly say that this is a little bit let's say colder color. I mean, outside looks more bluish, and you pretty much inverted the effect with what we have here. As for those wooden elements, you can either add noise to all of them or add random noise to some of them. How it's going to work, let me demonstrate. So we're not going to need this any longer, so we can delete this, and of course we're going to add a little bit radius. Since you worked with, I'm at least assuming, cylinders, you can add multiple cylinders just by doing a simple copy. And now I'm going to go for noise modifier. And you don't have to necessarily go crazy with it, but going crazy is going to probably be very helpful. Okay, this doesn't look good yet, but you know what I'm going for. So now let's change the scale a little bit, add some changes here and there, and now this is just one randomized element, so why not add more? Let's copy the modifier, select let's say just part of them, paste, and now you can see that this is pretty much doing all of them are doing almost exactly the same. That's why we're going to change the scaling and change the phase to, why it's not animated? Okay. Okay, so we're just going to change the phase, and since it's not working yet, we can go for make unique just for this one, and we can start changing the values a little bit. So now we have more randomized elements. This is going to look more realistic, and you can just go ahead and go a little bit more crazy, crazier than I did at least. So it's going to add this realism. And the trick is that you are supposed to add smaller values, so you're going to get a little bit more randomization, but at the same time, let's not go for too many height segments. So this is going to look a little bit, let's say, limited. And now, again, not too many segments, so we're not going to be limited by constraints of real world. And again, I'm going to add more in just one of the axes that I want. So in this case, I'm going to go for y-axis, so it's going to be more wibbly and wobbly from left to right. And of course, it's still not going to be perfect, so you need to work with it a little bit more, but this is just a few objects that you can work with. And of course, by randomizing all of those, you're going to get more and more effect. You could go for this ridiculous amount of detail that is going to be pretty much helpful by adding some extra mesh on top of your objects, like going for editable poly and trying to add a little bit something before adding turbo smooth, because one thing that I forgot to mention is that turbo smooth is going to be your friend in a situation like this, but as I said, we don't necessarily need to go that far. So that's one of the things that you may want to add, but of course remember about the capping. This is just simple modeling that you can now pretty much repeat. Try to rotate this object, and this is going to be step by step adding more detail. Look for some kind of displacement maps for your wood. Right now, you can see that we've got a lot of randomization, and that's how you can get it using just a simple noise. But you can still add more of it by going for any kind of wood displacement or wood height map. So if we try to add something like this, it's a glorified name for displacement map. So anything that looks like this is going to add a little bit more. So how it's going to look like? Probably something like this. But you just need to experiment, look for something, and find something that looks a little bit more to your liking than just random wood from a plank. So we need a little bit more natural wood, you know, just something that doesn't look yet processed, at least to some extent. So this is something that could probably look okay, but it's not that woody. So this is probably something better. So I think that would be enough about that one work. Good work, continue working on it, and we still need to see a little bit more from this shot. So I guess this is starting to either grow on me or this is getting better, because right now I see less problems with it. So yeah, just continue doing whatever you've done, because I'm really unable to tell you if you changed something. So move to items. Where did they move? Lake house. So you actually did add something, did you? Because this actually looks a little bit more composed. It somehow reads better. You mean for the next exterior as for next webinar, or next right now? I'm working on them. Okay, that actually explains a lot. Okay, now the brickwork, you probably would like to change the texture itself just a little bit, but I like what you did with the lawn, and this is pretty much the exterior we've already seen, so I'm not going to talk about this too much. So Donald, good job, and we still need a little bit more. 2 webinars left, and then guys, some of you asked me what's going to happen with the group after we are done with our webinars. So the Skype chat is going to stay. You can still talk, you can ask questions. I'm not going to be as active as I was up until today, but I'm going to hang out on this chat from time to time, but the thing is that I'm not going to be able to attend to it as much as I would during the group. So if you need something that is urgent, I would suggest you to email us. So that's the fastest way to get response, because our whole team is going to look into it, and if it's possible, we're going to answer even faster than on the Skype, at least with some more specific questions. So November 11, so nothing new here. No, I did not. Next webinar. Okay, this is still work in progress. Okay, material draft uploaded, draft review. My God. Wow, this is going to render for quite a while, but wow, this is looking good. Whatever you've done around here, continue doing that. This is looking hyper good. This is going to be really good. I hope that you will add just a hint of depth of field in here, so we're going to get this a little bit blurry, and I'm shocked. This is really great. Don't go for scattering all of those trees in the background. You can pretty much substitute them with multiple trees from just downloads, or at least try to use the optimized versions or whatever. Just don't make this too complicated for yourself. Really great job. Seriously, this is something really nice, and I love it. So I understand what you mean, that this is a work in progress. This is supposed to take you... Wait a second. Okay, I for a second I thought that you finished this. So this is looking great. There's no other comment I can add. So just continue working on it. Add 1 or 2 snails around here, and yeah, great job. Seriously, this is looking really, really good, and really great. As for your first one, I see that we have no real progress, but this is one of those exteriors that I guess is going to look just a bit better with a hint of color correction. So we can cancel this. We can go for our image autocorrect, and instantly it took away a little bit of those unrealistic colors. What I would do is add a little bit of background and play a little bit more with scaling of your grass. I'm not sure, but it looks like your grass has this small patches around here. I'm not sure what that is, but either you added too dense too dense scatter, or there's something going on, because those little froggies are just so prominent around here. So it's just going to be a little bit of work here and there, a little bit of clarity. And what is also important is that you control your object's burn. What does it mean? I mean it by as you can go for dodge tool, or you can go for burn tool and try to add a little bit more effects on your objects whatsoever. So sometimes you just need to add a little bit more brightness to some parts of your image just to make them stand out, at least partially. So you're going to get a little bit more vibrant, a little bit better vibe from your shot altogether. And as for the greens, try to play around with them as well, because as I said, the toning of your greens is going to be super important. And if we have a really green that stands out, you're going to pretty much have a little bit problem with it, because nobody's going to think that this is believable, and you definitely don't want that. So what we're going to do is add a little bit more saturation in the yellow colors and play a little bit with the greens, so we can level this out. And just by adding this small amount of vibrance, you can see that now the image as compared to the original is going to look just a hint better. So the original looks gloomy, and if we dehaze this and add all of this stuff, you can see that this is just going to go one up. I guess this texture around here is just a little bit too strong. What you can do is try to mix this with a plain color. Just make this texture stand out a little bit less, because this texture looks a little bit dirty, and you probably want to avoid that. Other than that, we just need a longer render times, and since this is your visual, why not add a little bit more sky? It's just a bonus, so that you can play with it a little bit more. But as I said, this could count as finished, but you and Donald, both of you are just too good to pretty much allow you to do half of the work. So I would say that both of you need to work on all of your shots just like that. So now this shot is going to just ask for a little bit of vignetting, so let's just go for it. Now I still haven't added any dehaze, so let's just try to do it. So we can go for hazing and dehazing. You can now read that we're getting a little bit better colors. We're basically losing the quality, because this is not exactly the type of image that you would regularly work with, but you can clearly see again that this is a little bit too dark, so that could be fixed in post. Now, by taking away a little bit of the temperature, I made this look more realistic, more a little bit less sepia type. So this is no longer an older photo, but we're still going to go for some vignetting. So we're going to add a little bit of it, and now you can read this gradient on the left. In this area, it's not going to be that visible, but still. And of course, the noise reduction, and sometimes, but not always, what is going to help in your visuals, especially once you're done rendering to some higher level. And I mean it as, let's say, less noise, not some higher setup or whatever. We just need to go for sharpen, and you can either use smart sharpen or just regular sharpen. Smart sharpen is actually smart, and it's going to make your image look a little bit better. So again, comparing this to the original, we can probably tell that well, something changed. at least partially, something changed. So you don't need to do this as contrasting, because this is a little bit over the top, but it's going to be more readable once you get rid of this super strong contrast in this concrete. So it's going to be a little bit softer and easier for your viewers. Let's just simply do a quick test by changing this, and you know what, I'm just going to blatantly try to blur it out without the window. So let's just deselect the window. I know this is not exactly the best idea right now, but still Control J to create a copy. And now let's just try to not only go for a little bit of levels, so we can just make this a little bit brighter, but also we can select this and try to go for just a little bit testing with a median. So I'm just going to try to blur it out to some extent, and when we lose a little bit of that detail, I know it looks awful now, but from the back, from the far away right now, without this super strong contrast, you can see that this is going to be a little bit more welcoming to your viewer. Again, this is a little bit too much, but just a hint of it is going to be enough to make your buildings more elegant, more aesthetic, and your visuals are going to stand out, because now your viewer knows where he is supposed to look, what exactly is important. And this is pretty much it. Rest is just a little bit post-production, adding details here and there, and probably getting rid of this whatever that is, but because it just takes away so much focus from the viewer. At least in my opinion, you can simply desaturate this or change its color to something green, because right now this was standing out like it wouldn't have any colors. But if we go for the saturation as we did 1 second ago, so let's just try to desaturate this, you can see that now everything is properly toned. So this would be my biggest advice to you. And this is a 3D visual, why not add a nice sky? Just like that, you can do whatever you like. You can do well, bluish sky, or if you're going for specific mode, you don't have to, but I really like to add gradients like this. I know this looks really bad right now, but just a hint of it. So we're going to get more vibrant visual, but of course don't go overboard. We still don't need this to be too bright, too hard. We just need subtle effects. We need 10% of it, so it's going to add a little bit of it. So this is pretty much it. Nothing else is needed, and once you go through this process, I'm pretty sure that your visual is going to just step up on next level, because everything here is technically correct. Just needs a little bit of review, a little bit of idea. Just talking about this, just talking about your whole shot is enough to improve it, because you already know that you know how to do visuals, but you just need to get this skill of finishing. You just need to do this one extra step. You need to add just a little bit of it. So the same thing happened to your friend Attila. His visuals were amazing, but they lacked a little bit more idea what you're aiming at and what you want to create. So that'll be it. I would say that this is finished, and just do a little bit of magic. You also said that you're working on your interior. I guess this is not it yet. So when you grotto final, no, this is not a final, definitely not. So now let's go back to our groups folder. Katerina, I hope that there's a lot of things going on, because last time when looking at this, give me a minute. Okay, this is the reference. This is the reference, surely. So not yet finished. But this one is tricky. This one is definitely. This is a visual, but guys, this looks amazing. So as always, nothing to add. I would say that this only needs render time. Probably a bit darker wood around here, so make the bark a little bit darker, more translucency, and let those plants breathe a little bit. You know, you don't need, my renders are in final. Okay, finals. No, they're not. So this is yeah, this is your final render, and you fixed this those logs, so definitely better. Still, you could add a little bit. I'm not sure how you added this, but if you would add more randomization, scale wise, rotation, it wouldn't really create these patterns. But congratulations, looks amazing. Nothing really to add. Like this, for somebody who doesn't do visuals, this is going to be 100% a photo. There's just nothing to point out that looks fake, other than just the quality overall. Not like fake quality, but the quality is just too good to be real. So great job. Like, I definitely don't have anything to add. So final render, okay. Exterior inspiration, but still we're going to talk a little bit about this. So okay, I am now positive that this is your render. Okay, looking great. To add those reflections, you already know that you need to add something to be reflected. Of course, you can add either fake light, as they did around here, or you can just reposition the sun a little bit so the light is going to be warmer. Remember, this background is totally photoshopped. There's no way that it's not. So that's one thing. Also, using just a regular IS lights is going to be enough to create those nice effects around here, and the same thing goes for you. You just need to take this into Photoshop, play for a few minutes, and you're going to get the effects you actually need. But don't over stress it. It's already amazing. Wait a sec, my renders are in final. Katerina, that's yeah, this is amazing. So now this needs only a little bit of Photoshop here and there. Remember, this is heavily photoshopped and oversaturated, overhued, so you don't have to do one-to-one. So just don't make this harder for yourself than it has to be. All you need to do is take this into Photoshop, take into account that a lot of stuff in this shot was just simply pasted in and over Photoshop. So again, don't go for this super saturated colors just coming from the render. You can get that, but it's not going to be that easy. So just a little bit of clarity, we can see that now our blacks are a little bit stronger. Adding a little bit of contrast is going to do the same, but we still need to take out some of the power from the shadows, because we don't need this to be as black as it was. At least we don't need this darker colors to be as deep. Now, saturating the greens again is going to put out all of these colors, but now this grass is going to stand out, so we may want to tone it down a little bit. Again, you probably want to mask those before you Photoshop them, and again play around left and right up until you get to the mood you're actually going for. So I guess you want to go for something a little bit more yellowish, but doesn't matter at this moment because we can also move our yellows into greens, so we're going to get more of that color, but again, this is all up to you. So in your case, it's just that, and of course super bright and super saturated sky. So that's one of the things that those guys did with that shot, and personally, I don't like it, but this is something that sells. So I know this is a little bit too much. Again, I'm not trying to be precise. At this moment, all you need to do is just go for sky, clouds, whatever, and pick something that is enough. Remember to follow our video and actually do it from the 3ds Max level, not exactly as I'm going to do it. I'm just going to show you that it's just that your shot just needs 2 seconds more and you're done. Pick whatever clouds you like, just go for it, copy, paste, and now of course you still need to mask it to some extent. Don't really care about this horizon at this moment, and we're just going to try to add either multiply, or we can go for darker colors, overlays, but usually screen is also a very good idea, but all depends on your masking method, and sometimes normal is enough. So just go through the options. I would say that usually color dodge is quite okay, but this will require you to change the fill a little bit. Up until the 10%, so you're going to get a little bit more. But in this case, multiply looked the best. So we can just go for it, but again, screen or overlay, still this is going to be your safe options. Now let's just select some of this like that. I don't need anything more. So this is pretty much it. This is how they do it. This is how these people work with images like that. This is something that they spend hours on, and this is why you always have this high expectations for your regular shots, because those are super heavily photoshopped, and you just need to know what you're going for. Usually it's just the right composition. So as I said in the video, in our chat, it's going to be a little bit of median to check what is standing out the most. So in this case, you can read all the colors, you can check the composition, you can just try to play with it a little bit. So I think you don't lack it, you just don't try it. It's not something you need to know. It's just that at some point you need to try, let's say, take a noisy image and just swap multiple layers of something on top of it. You're going to figure it out, like the sky and everything else. It's just something that is going to be easy for you at some point, but you just need to experiment with it. And this Photoshop thing is, as you've seen, it takes you 5 to 10 seconds just to experiment, so you can just try to translate that to Photoshop, 3ds Max, because some of those options that I've mentioned, like this grass color standing out, you can just select it, check whatever needs to be done. So let's go for hue saturation, move it left, move it right. I guess moving it right is going to be okay. Saturating, desaturating, making it darker works fine. And now I can desaturate again and try to move it left and right. Now they compose a little bit better. And since I added a little bit more to the blue, took away a little bit of saturation and took away a little bit of the brightness, all you need to do is go for Corona Color Correct and add pretty much the same values there, but instead of lightness you go for gamma, so it's going to be 0.3 gamma less. That's really it. And there's no super secret to design. There's nothing like that. It's just you getting this aesthetic eye and thinking about the pictures, because all of you already have the skill set, but you just need to go one step further with your post-production. Not necessarily post-production, just understanding what you're trying to achieve, because let's be fair, this is just super over photoshopped. This is something called HDR photography. Just look it up. It's just a bunch of pictures with different exposures on top of each other, and that's pretty much it. Let's just look into it and see what it does. So some of the images, some of those images are just going to be over the top, so we don't want that. We just need to fake those effects to some extent, but you can see some similarities in the blacks, in the depth of the colors. All of those images here are just over the top, but you're going to quickly notice that some of those effects are going to be visible, especially around the black and white areas. You can always see some of this bloom, and this also happens around here. It's a very subtle effect, but it's there. So you just need to look for it, and of course take your images to Photoshop and add whatever you need. But we're not going to focus on it that much. Really great job on that snowy hot. I really love it. So great job. Małgorzata, what do we have here? Still more progress. Yeah. By the way, Małgorzata, one day when you decide to start asking questions, I'm online and I would really love to help you with whatever you need help with. So if you need any help, just try to contact me or any of our support, and we're going to quickly give you hints. We would actually love to do that. So great job, continue working. And Mario, let's see your renders. Were you able to work on your items? Yes, you actually were. This looks fixed, and guys, I really appreciate that you do these shots. They look amazingly good. So again, it's finished. Nothing to add. You could point out something here and there and try to change it, but is there any point with that? Or is there any point to that? Because at this moment, this is just looking amazing. You even try to recreate this structure around here. It shows that you really paid attention to detail, and really, this is something amazing. I would say that you are one of the biggest surprises from this whole group. I mean, you started with a little bit of problems with the first homeworks, but what you delivered now is really impressive. So I would say that you definitely passed, and I love your work. Still in love with that one interior that's going to really stay with me for quite a while. Still working on it. It shows. Go a little bit easy on the bump, and it's going to look better, because you don't need again, this is a HDRI photo to some extent. You just need a subtle bump around here. Remember to visit those pages with extra models that are already there's a free tool you can use to turn your renders into HDR photography ones. It's called Aurora. You can post it on the group. It's going to be a good idea. It's just something that you can actually try to try to share. And now let's continue and go for Miroslava's folder. Again, Miroslava, this this is almost finished, but not exactly. When you're online and you're going to work on this, please give me a call, or we're going to talk about this, because there's a little bit of, there are a few things that I would like to fix with you, just because this is a really easy image to finish, at least from the point we're at right now, and it's not going to be problematic to actually help you. There's still a little bit of lower exposition needed. We need a little bit more colors, contrasts, and still we're going to work on just a little bit in Photoshop. But composition wise, we could add something that would substitute for this house, at least a bigger tree, because right now this doesn't really compose as good as it would otherwise, because those little houses, they add a little bit. So you can either add some trees or something as a substitute. Slow but steady, definitely looking good. I would say that at this moment we've got this brick ceiling, and Mike, how can I add bricks to something like this when it's a cylinder and you haven't really covered this? Well, yes, we didn't, so why not do it now? So there are options that you can explore. One of them is just going for really love this. Okay, so one of the options is that you can go for a regular cylinder and add the maps as you go. So nothing really that special. So let's go for Corona Material. You know what? I'm going to just go for Corona Material Library just for a second to use the textures there, because there's still some bricks that we can use. Just wait for it to load. Now let's go for walls. Remember, guys, that you can always use this. Oh, this is in stone. You can always use these textures. There's no shame in that. Actually, they do look okay, so why not try them out from time to time? Okay, let's show this in the viewport. Let's actually show it. Okay, this doesn't look anywhere near good. So one of your options is to simply go for regular cylinder and just put it there, and it's going to be okay. But if you want to go for some more specific shape, what you can do is start from a box or any other object whatsoever. Just add enough segments to it. No height segments at this moment are needed, so let's go for lower values. Again, I'm going to add these bricks, real world, just to use this. But usually when you do your materials, remember that your materials, the regular materials, most of the downloaded materials, pretty much 90% of the materials that you will encounter, 95 even, are going to use regular, not real world mapping. So that's why you should always try to conduct yourself in that manner. But Corona materials are using real world map size, which is very annoying, because now if I want to change just one value and it's going to be size of this texture, I need to go through all of those textures one by one, and just imagine having 5, 10, 20 materials like that. Well, not my tempo. Let's now add bend, and this is it. Yeah, this is looking bad, this is looking better, and this is looking good. So now this is second option for you, and now we can go back to the UVW map, and we can even rotate it if we wish to do so, and this is going to look quite okay in the render as well. So let me just move this somewhere around here. Let's just move it here. Now you may be a little bit confused why I'm moving this planar map and it's not actually bending this texture or not doing something like this. It's because before I bend this object, I actually mapped it, so the map is below the bending. So once I have this map, I'm bending this, so this is pretty much why this is still looking okay. So that's one of your options. I would actually advise you to try to follow this as I did, because it's actually going to be easy and fast. Now let's just go for UVW mapping again. Move it, come on, UVW map. Okay, now I've got this gizmo. Let's move it a little bit so we're not going to get this effect, and now you can see that all of those bricks are looking more or less good. Still, we need to make sure that the scaling is okay, and this is going to be enough. Most of the cases are not going to allow you for this kind of modeling, but you get this, right? I mean, you don't have to necessarily do those super elaborate techniques that would take you ages to accomplish. It's just that you need to do it like this. I mean, fast, easy, and smart. Being efficient is being good. You just need to understand where and when you can let go when doing your renders. So I would say that the modeling part is pretty much done. Download some of the props, just add some of the objects that you don't need. Add the water. In your case, I would strongly suggest you to follow the caustics video, because you're going to get these effects if you do them properly. And since you're using Corona Sun as we instructed you, this is going to be very, very, very helpful. So yeah, just do that. And what to do if the curved wall is thicker? Then if it's thicker, you probably need to remap one of the parts of your object. So what I mean by that is that probably you're going to have to add either different mapping for your different type of mapping. So let's go for box in this case. This doesn't look good, this doesn't look real, it's not going to work this way. So again, I need to change this to Y, and this is one of your options. So you can try to do it like this. This is how some of the bricks are laid. So that's one of your options. But unfortunately, if you need to do those single bricks, you will probably need to first create the texture and then bend it, or add it as a part of this arc just before bending. If you already have model that is going to require you to add the texture, your best bet is just rendering the part of it and positioning your texture using UVW mapping. It's just the fastest and easiest way, but it all depends on the situation, and it's not ideal solution. So let's just now continue and talk about our next student's work. So now, Nathan, what do we have here? Fingers crossed. Wow, this is looking good. I love this. So we need a little bit more sky. You probably could go a little bit easier on the wood itself, because right now it's a bit too dense. You can see that those trees are touching, and you need to give them a little bit space to breathe. But the grass looks okay, especially in this area. I love those shadows. Yeah, this house looks amazing. Play a little bit more with the grass, add a little bit more randomization, because there's probably more than just two colors at work, because you can see more options. So maybe try to work with it a little bit more, but you don't have to overstress it. It's actually almost ready. Again, your work is going to require a little bit of photoshopping, and that's a fact. So yeah, just still have post-production to do. You definitely do. Looking good. Finish it up, and you can start working on another one. So Shafiq, no progress yet, and let's see Theodore's work. So we already know this work, and there's nothing to add here. I really like it. This is really something. Earlier you shown this page with those guys. This company is really professional, and it's good to have something to look up to. Remember that some of those renders are photo manipulation. That means that they went to the site, they took a photo, and they made sure that the photo looks good, and they then composed in the render. So you can see that this is actually one of those. This is again the same thing. It's just that they add a lot of amazing work just by like that, thanks to photo manipulation. That's not exact. That's actually 3D visuals are cheating. This is cheating the cheaters. I know that you did. That's why I'm just going to jump into this. Wow, good job, amazing. I love that you added these people. You added something inside, and the mood is amazing. So definitely just do I need to add anything? Not really. I guess this is the moment when you wanted to know how to do those fireflies, right? This is the exact thing you wanted to do with them. For the fireflies, I would probably suggest you to get some kind of texture or some kind of object that is going to be used as your bug. So let's just do something like this. This is going to be our well, bug, I guess. So let's just go for it, and without any further ado, let's just change this into a beautiful moth. There are actually models to download of a moth, so you probably don't have to butcher your models like I do. But why not waste a little bit of time since you're all watching while I am modeling some kind of abomination. So okay, let's add this in. Looks great. Like I would say that Pixar is definitely going to be jealous. So let's scale this down up until we actually like it, so we don't have to look at it. Reset it X form, editable poly, and now you're probably going to use some kind of materials on it. You don't have to be super specific, but you probably want to go for 2 IDs because you want to make this object's backside glow. So we're going to create two quick materials, and we're going to connect them with multi-sub-object map. Since we already added material ID 1 to the whole object, and we're going to add, we already also added material ID 2 to the back of it. I'm just going to go for material, advanced, self-illumination, and set this to 1. Why should you use self-illumination for objects like this instead of corona light? Mostly because self-illumination is not going to be treated as light. It's just going to be treated as a very bright color. The difference is that lights are slowing down. Each individual light that you add into your scene is going to require some level of photons to recalculate the whole scene. So if the light is very subtle, like a bug, you don't really need to add any elaborate material to it. Of course, if you want to go a little bit more crazier than usual, you can, as always, go for corona multi-map and just plug the color inside of your self-illumination, so it's going to be self-illuminated accordingly to the mesh element. But more about it later, because right now I'm going to create a small, or rather big sphere, which is going to be our light bulb, or whatever you like to place your bugs around. Scatter. We're not going to use particles for this, even though this would be probably the better way to go about this, because we don't need to. At this moment, I'm just going to again show us the full mesh. Yeah, looking bad, right? That's why I'm going to select this object properties and turn off the renderability of that sphere. We need as many as 100 mobs right now, and I guess those are way too big. So let's make sure that we've got some alphas and betas. So let's hide this. Okay, now they look like small satellites around around the globe. So we're going to add super random rotation, because those are bugs. So we don't need anything other than just randomization on them. And a lot of translation. So just add it in, and now your bugs are flying around whatever object you wanted. So you may want to allow them to focus somewhere closer to the center, or you can just play around with them. Remember that adding the translation in all axes is going to further randomize your bugs appearance, but at the same time, just don't stress it. Those are bugs. You don't need to be super precise with them. And remember, since those are still not connected to any material, I'm going to add this material right now. So this is it. Since I added this Corona multi-map, they look like Christmas lights, but why I did that is because if we go for item count 1 and add gamma randomization at around 5%, we're going to further randomize the level at which those are going to shine. So you can also go for more yellowy color, and so since we're here, why not just go ahead, add a little bit of bloom and glare, create a camera. Okay, let's go for create a camera, and now we can play a little bit with the depth. So depth of field is going to be enough to pretty much cover everything. So of course, if we add this in, we can move this all around, and yeah, we've got our bugs, or we've got our bugs in the distance. You definitely want to keep the scale small, so probably you're going to know what scale your bugs are supposed to be, so they create a better effect. So don't overstress it. You don't have to be precise. Those are small objects, and don't add too many of them, because this is just going to look bad, like random noise. So 50, 100 is going to be enough. You may want to create multiple objects that those are going to just buzz around. So yeah, that's how you can add bugs. Okay, so Theodore, congratulations, this is really looking good. I really love it. So definitely good job. Now, oh, we've got something extra. So this is actually being still work in progress. Yeah, looks like so. One hint, and one thing I hate in interiors is that when we have an angle like this, at this moment you have dynamic camera a bit, or let's say front camera a bit. You don't go for a bit. You either go straight to the left or you go up front. You never go just a bit. But other than that, I like it. So just continue working on it. As for this glass, it's not going to be a surprise that you need to model everything from the scratch, and it's going to take you many hours. or you can actually go for something as simple as a simple plane and go for any kind of material. Let's just pick our corona material, go for corona material, add this with refraction. You may want to skip the thickness of your object. Remember that since corona is now using caustics, the refraction without any depth is going to react a little bit different. So what we can do instead is go for some thickness in our material, so it's going to look more or less realistic. So for now I'm going to delete this override for my background. Let's just do it so we can see the background and how the reflection is now working. Diffuse is not needed at this moment. Refraction and reflection are doing their job. So corona bump converter and gradient. You don't need to create elaborate materials to create this effect. That's why we're just going to go for solid, since we already know how to use this gradient because I just shown you. We're going to put it in our input, put it here in the bump, and now you can see that we've got this small bump. It's not enough. That's why we're going to add a little bit of tiling. Still not enough. That's why we're going to go for 50. And that is actually enough. That is actually enough. You probably are not going to have anything related to good time when rendering this. So what you can do to reduce the render time is either try to experiment how this is going to look like when you only use a single flat plane, but as you can see, this doesn't look that good. So when you do this, try to go for two material IDs. One of the material IDs is going to be the same glass but without the bump. So it's just going to make your render a little bit faster. So it's just something like 5%, so not going to be really that of a game changer. But now material ID for the top and material ID 1 for the top, material ID for the whole rest, so Control I to reverse the selection. And now with both of those glass materials, we're going to create this object. Now not only we have a little bit more control over this effect, but now we have this pretty much set. If you don't want this to be well as precise as this is, you can still go inside the gradient and change this from the solid state to, let's say, linear. It's still going to produce some effects, but at this moment we want to mirror this. So we're going to go for black, white, black. So black, white, black. And now you can see how it works. So unfortunately, to get the full effect of rounded edges, you would have to play a little bit more with the gradient, but you get the point. It's just not going to be that long. It's not going to take you that much time to create this. It's really easy to do, and it's just going. The problem with objects like this is that they render long. They really do render quite a while. So that's a pity, but the effect is nice. I like it. So don't model it, just bump it, and this is going to be still a lifesaver, even though it's still going to render for quite a while. And now we're jumping into this scene that I mentioned to you guys. So this is it. This is pretty much how you can set up your lights to mimic the effects that we've seen in this from this small irrelevant studio. Of course, I know that they are amazing. So let's just go for this image that I tried to reproduce to some extent. So the effect is pretty much the same. The only difference is that they controlled the translucency a little bit differently. So you just need to remember that effects like this are going to require multiple steps. First of all, what you need to remember is that all of the light that you can see here is not exactly 100% coming from the sun itself. So that means that they can, and they usually do, I mean, studios like that, they usually add some kind of fake light into the scene. So this fake light, without the global illumination, I mean without the global volume material, is going to create those effects around your leaves. So right now we're not getting almost any of this effect. Why? Because we still need more translucency. So let's just go ahead and check out this material. So the material itself is going to be really usual. So the diffuse map, translucency color map, and opacity map. Nothing else is needed. You don't need a lot of reflection. You basically can just turn it off because at some point it's just going to be redundant to use it anyway. But if we go for glossiness of 0.8, you're going to get a little bit of reflection, and the light is still going to be reflected, especially in areas like this. But we don't want those fireflies because they look awful. So that's how you can do it. By controlling this translucency option, value, we're going to pretty much allow or disallow more light to pass through our plants. So let's just move around our sun. So it's just going to show you, so we're going to show you a little bit how this effect works. So there's really nothing extra in it. If the light is shining through this object directly, we're getting this effect around. So by controlling the power of the light and going for more or less exposure, less highlights, we're going to get there up until we actually get the desired effect. And it's all about the translucency in this case, because it's just there. It's just something that we need to remember, that this is not some elaborate effect that is going to I don't know, be in any way hard. It's just that we need to remember how it's done, and you're going to be able to do it. But still, this particular studio added this foggy effect, which is really nice. And as you can see now, we're getting almost the same effects, just the position of the sun is a teeny bit different. So let's move it to the right. So now we cannot see the light directly, but again, we're getting those halos effects around our trees. Just a little bit longer render time, and we're going to get there. So let's reduce the contrast, so it's going to be a little bit easier to read. And now, what is going to be important in this whole setup is that you can use two options. Two options are going to be pretty much our game changers, and that is either following the tutorial I gave you about the volumetrics in the first at the first time. So you will have to go a few webinars back to create this fog with distance map. This is going to be almost the same thing, but with just a volume map. And let's just reset this to almost default and start working with it. Okay, this took a little bit longer than I anticipated, so I'm just going to quickly show it to you, and we're going to jump into another thing, which is video VDB. So in a second. Anyway, right now we've got our volume material turned on. So guys, I know that you love this image already, but we still need to add this effect. So let me just move this around, so we're going to get almost the same shadows as we had in our inspiration. Yeah, pretty close. Okay, so now this is showing. You can see that some of the reflections are really, as I said, redundant, so you can either wait for them to recalculate. So this is going to take your render time pretty much through the roof, but it's still going to give you this nice effect. Remember to not highlight compress too much, because it's going to cut some of this nice effect, those nice effects that you want to have. And now let's add just a teeny bit of distance. Okay, teeny bit is not enough. That's why 1.5 meters is still not enough. 15 meters, okay, we're getting somewhere, but still not it. So let's add a bit more, shall we? So let's add one more 0, and this is starting to look somewhat this is starting to somewhat resemble what we are trying to achieve, but this is just a light being absorbed, not scattered. That's why we're going to, okay, this is actually scattered already. So this is light absorbed because the scattering is black, and this is light being scattered. So by changing the color, we can pretty much add a little bit of the mood. And again, this is something that was used in that scene. Just by going for a single bounce and adding a little bit of color to your scatter, you can pretty much add just a hint of this effect. And again, I'm going to make this scatter very subtle with this effect, by combining this with your regular distance map, distancing from the ground. You could pretty much cut off this effect somewhere around here, but it's not going to be that necessary. So we still have this directionality option. So negative directionality is going to be best for clouds and adding a little bit of halo around your volumetrics objects. So if you want to create fog, this is not the way to go. But if you go for the positive values, we're going to get into this nice territory where we can actually see something called the God rays. So let's move around the sun a little bit more. So we're going to get them, we're going to produce more of them. So let's put the sun a little bit lower, and now you can see that we're getting those beautiful effects. We've got those beautiful effects that are called God rays. So again, let's go for a little bit more highlight compression. And I know this is over the top, but this is the effect they have here. This is just 10 or 20 times more subtle than I have. So you probably need to add one more 0 to your distance, and it's going to be enough to create this effect. There is still something that I really like in scatter, and since we have this option, why not explore it a little bit? So I'm still going to add one more 0. So we've got this effect quite strong. It's strong. So for a second, I'm going to turn off the sun, and what I'm going to do now is add emission. Remember that adding an emission is pretty much going to give you quite let's say funny effects. So you don't want your emission to be too low, because this is the effect you're going to get. What you need instead is pretty much the same value as the distance. So the more objects you have in your scene, the more effect you're going to have. But in this case, we just don't have enough objects to actually make this effect appear in any meaningful way. But what this does is it changes the color of this whole scene by illuminating it to some extent. So the further your objects are, the more light they're going to produce. So this can be used with some kind of HDRI map. So for instance, if you just want to create a really foggy effect, really grim mood, emission is going to allow you to actually render out your fog a bit faster, but still with limited effects. So if we go for this emission right now and add it in, you can see that this is everything in this HDRI is trying to map onto all of those objects. That's why we should always try to use simple colors, simple maps with this emission. So if you want to create, let's say, a long tunnel for whatever client that's going to need it, maybe you're going to do a power plant or some high, like Eiffel Tower stuff, it's probably going to be very, very useful to have this option, to just use it, because the further the objects are going to be away from your camera, the more effect you're going to get on them. So even though this fog is still not ideal because it requires extra mapping, it's going to be enough to create those God rays. But remember, guys, that this is actually going to slow down your render by a margin. So you don't want to make this too strong. You don't want this to make too powerful. Guys, I guess an hour and a half as a bonus webinar is going to be enough. Next time I'm going to jump straight into the maps. So do me a favor and try to put only the most recent images in your main folder, so we can just jump quickly through it. And I'm going to show you how to map objects like roads, well, a lot of objects. So as I said, this is again a very, very powerful effect, this emission. So try to use it and love it. So yeah, definitely do that. Anyway, guys, as I was saying, next time we're going to jump straight into that. So just make sure that you update your folders, make sure that the folders are clean and tidy, so we can just move through them as fast as possible. And next time I'm going to show you actually, well, the things that you actually want to see. So it's all on you to make sure that we can move through all of that quickly and easy. But since I still have you and I don't want to go back to the volumetrics, I'm still going to give you one last bonus. So I said that working with clouds is hard. It is, because it requires special objects that are a volume grid, and we're going to use files that are VDB. So let's just load one. It's a special object like chronoscatter or proxy, but this is let's say a proxy for simulation of water, of fire, any substance. I actually haven't yet got my hands on fire, but I guess I'm just going to download it and send to the group. Let's just go for regular smoke and try to render it out. Okay, so this is it, right? So this is a 3D object, which is actually your smoke. This is not a texture, this is a object which can be counted as smoke. It doesn't look that great yet. Why? Because it doesn't have any options yet set. So we need to add some kind of options in it by adding emission or whatever option you would like. So animation is not going to be necessary, and we just want to go for a little bit of absorption, and we're going to scale it down up until we see our object. We cannot yet see it because at this moment this object is just not going to scatter any light. So again, we're going to go for density, and at this moment you can see that this whole volume grid is just covering this one object. So at this point we can experiment a little bit more and try to scale down both of those values. So let's just go for 1, and at this moment, as I said, it's going to require a little bit more action from us. Why? Because at this moment, again, if we play a little bit with it, we're going to get to the point where we have our simulation of some kind of cloud or smoke in high quality, which is going to be just 100% accurate according to the simulation. It's going to look amazingly good in your renders, and by working with emission, we're going to get to this effect. And as you can now see, I'm pretty much creating fire, which is not exactly it, but this is the same thing I worked with when I was doing my previous emission. So this is the same rule. We still have our temperature thinned, so I'm just going to add a little bit of bluish color or yellow, orange, so it's going to look fiery. And honestly, this is how you create most of the effects like that. By controlling the scale of the absorption, you're going to pretty much change how dense your smoke is going to be, or how light it is going to be. Scattering is just going to scatter all the objects inside of the volume. So the same thing applies as with the volumetrics. So this is not a fire, this is actually a smoke, so we don't need this inside. We probably don't need the scattering or absorption. Actually we do both. We need both. That's new. So by controlling both of the scales, we can set up how thick our smoke is supposed to be. The objects that you can use are pretty much limitless as long as you have some kind of object prepared. So in this case, this is a regular bunny that is used by many artists to check out all the options. So again, let's go for emission, and remember, this is going to be a volume. This is not exactly something that is just texture. So if you put in a box inside of it and the box is just going to stand out of it, let's just go for a little bit more reasonable values, 10 by 10 by 10. So this object can go inside of this bunny, and you're going to see how it is devoured by this smoke. It is something that is just tremendously good. It's something that looks amazing in your renders, but simulating this is very complicated and requires plugins. So this is why I was so hesitant to show it to you, because at this moment it's just a little bit too, well, let's say complicated to quickly cover, and I just didn't want to do it without really giving you any hope of using it. So I would say that this is going to be the end of our today's webinar, and we're going to see each other on Friday. Guys, I guess we're just going to have to wait until Friday so we can work with mapping and more requests. So guys, prepare a little bit of requests, because we're still in need of them, since we're going to work with streets. I'm also going to show you 2D plan modeling. So this is going to be quite fast, quite easy, nothing really that important. We already know how to do it, but you just need to get the tools together to do it. Guys, thank you very much for your attention, and see you. So guys, again, thank you very much for your attention, and see you on Friday. Yeah, so thank you very much that you appreciate that. That really is, well, that sounds good. Rain, snow. Rain and snow can be done in two ways, and I'm going to quickly explain it next time, not today. Thank you very much, and I already have the list for the next month. So the streets, 2D modeling, and snow and rain. So thank you very much, and see you on Friday. Bye bye. Now I just need to find a window how to end this stream. So again, thank you, bye bye.